Okay. Hello and welcome. My name is Frances and thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid you welcome. There is a subscribe button below if you would like to help support my channel by subscribing, and also a bell to be notified as to when I upload more content. I'm coming to you from Ghana country, and as such I acknowledge the Ghana people of the Adelaide Plains as being the traditional custodians of this land. So if you are a regular visitor to my channel, you may already notice that I am not alone. I have a special guest who I am about to introduce you to. And this is sort of a follow-on from my recent summit that I did return to the Mother, where I was holding space for speakers from around the world, where we discussed concepts of the divine feminine, goddess consciousness, and earth awareness. So following on from this theme, I am very delighted to be chatting with the Bard of Ely, Steve Andrews. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me on here, Frances. I'm very pleased to be here.
And I'm looking forward to our chat. So for anyone who's not familiar with Steve, he is a singer-songwriter, a poet, an author, and an activist, originally from Cardiff in Wales, now living in Portugal, and he's currently sharing his couch with 2 cats. So we may see Mother or Cuddly pop up, depending if they want to be sociable or not. But Steve became known as the Bard of Ely through the Big Issue magazine, which is a global magazine helping homeless people. And he was a commonist there, living on the Ely estate in Cardiff. But aside from that, Steve is also a druid, a quest knight, a bard of King Arthur Pendragon's loyal Arthurian warband. And some of his highlights have included being performing at the Green Man and Glastonbury festivals, also on television for Britain's Got Talent. But all that aside, what we are going to be speaking about today is Mother Ocean, Mother Nature, and Mother Earth. So these topics are very passionate of mine due to my last summit, but I would like to sort of start, Steve, with you maybe sharing a little bit about your backstory and where did your passion for Mother Earth begin?
Well, thank you for asking me that, because this is very important. And it began when I was a little boy, I would say about 4 or 5, when I'd go out in the garden and I would find whatever was in the garden. I'd find the flowers and the insects, bees and butterflies and beetles, and we had a pet tortoise at the time, and I just fell in love with nature, with all of the creatures and the flowers and everything. And I was lucky because my parents, did nothing to discourage me with this. So maybe I would ask a question. I'd say, Mum, Dad, what is this? And I would refer them to a flower I'd found or an insect or something, and they wouldn't know. And they'd say, well, we'll get you a book. So they got me all these books on nature, when I was little. And that was what I was totally into. And also, my dad used to take the family out in the car, and we go out into the countryside, and sometimes we go to a beach. And I would discover all of the flowers and the creatures which lived there. And so this was amazing for me. And I would look them up in my books, and I'd think, okay, I've just found this, and now I know where it lives. And this was all like knowledge, which is coming to me. And my mum used to actually think it was funny, because when we went to the beach, like most people wanted to go in the sea or paddling or make sand castles or something like that, I didn't want to do that. I used to wear my my rubber boots. And I did this because I would go in the rock pools, and it was like, climbing over the rocks and stuff. You needed good footwear. And I would go in the rock pools and see what I could find. And I was far more interested in that than going in the sea or doing anything on the sand. So that gives you some kind of insight into what I was like. And then as I've grown up, my love for nature kind of stayed with me. So all my life, including like now, I learn about nature. And I've lived not only in Portugal, I also lived in Tenerife in the Canary Islands. And why I mention that is because when I lived in the UK in Wales, I knew a lot about the plants and the animals and the insects and the birds that lived in Wales, in the area I was in, and I maybe knew a bit about the ones in other parts of the country. When I went to Tenerife, there was a whole load of new things, new plants and new insects, and some that I also knew that were also, found in the UK. But it was a learning process. And now I've come to Portugal, it's the same thing. I find a lot of insects and plants which I know from the UK, and others that I don't know, and some which were also on Tenerife. And so it's a learning process. And I like to help butterflies, and so I look after the caterpillars and through the chrysalis stage, and then I release them and I do all that. And so I learn about, what butterflies live here, what ones I can help. I've given talks on this. I've got a book on this. And I think it's important basically to, if you connect with nature, with Mother Nature, Mother Earth, if we make that connection, then we learn, and then we can spread, what our knowledge, what we know with others, so they can also learn and often and help. Like I say with butterflies, it's, if you want to help butterflies, it's actually quite simple. You find out what plants the female of that species needs to lay her eggs on for the caterpillars to eat. You grow those plants, and then you have like flowers for the adult butterflies to feed from for the nectar. But most important, you need the right plants for the caterpillars. And so you need to learn that. And I gave a talk, actually, I told you I'm in a Rotary Club. I gave a talk to a Rotary Club of Wyndham Harbour in Australia not so long ago. And I don't know anything about Australian butterflies, but I very quickly found, I just Googled like butterflies in Melbourne, and all these species came up, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't know. And again, I could find out quite quickly like what plants the ones in the Melbourne area of Australia would need. And so I could talk about that. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that wherever you are in the world, if you want to help butterflies, you find out what types live where you are, and you find out what plants they need. You grow those plants, and it's like it with everything. It's, I see like the whole planet has got, different species that live in different habitats, and they need specific conditions and specific foods and whatever. And if we learn about that, and we learn how to look after, the environment, the wildlife habitats, and then all of this, we're playing our part. And I'm going to be talking about the Kogi people. So I'm not talking about them now, but I mean, the Kogi people are from Colombia, and they actually say that humans were made to look after the rest of the creation. We haven't made a very good job of it, but that was the intent in the beginning. Now, and these people, the Kogi people, they have absolutely fantastic knowledge of the environment. They know from where they live in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in Colombia. They can look at how the different areas of that mountain are, and they can predict what it's like elsewhere in the world. It's like a microcosm of the macrocosm. And they believe that they were given the job of being the guardians of the planet. Okay. And they say that the mountain, the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, they call that the heart of the world. And so the state of the world is most important to them. And they, obviously, if they're the guardians, and they know how everything should be and how it should work. So which I agree with completely, because that's what I was saying earlier. You know, I can see how that works.
Mm. No,
I think I probably answered your question there and gone off topic a bit, but
no, that's fine, Steve. You actually answered another question that I was going to sort of like lead in afterwards, which sort of ties in your one of your books, which is on moths and butterflies. But yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And coming back to the Kogi people, I think this is also seen in other Indigenous peoples around the world. Here in Australia, I know they're Aboriginal people. They don't see themselves as owners; they see themselves as guardians, as protectors. And I think this, especially for us of the Western mindsets, Caucasian background or wherever our background is, it's this mindset that we need to sort of shift, that we don't actually own the land. It's like we are guardians, we are protected, and it's this connection coming back to um, looking after the land and Mother Earth, because we are all part of it. And as you mentioned, if we don't play our part, it's not just us who is infected or impacted upon, it goes all around the world at different levels. And it is the insects, because they're small, that we forget about how important their role is. Even as you just mentioned, the butterflies and moths, they actually do play a very integral part in our food supply that we have overlooked because they are so tiny as well.
yes, that's right. And well, 2 points I would come in on what you just said is one about the indigenous people. As far as I'm concerned, the indigenous people all over the whole planet, they know how to live in tune with nature and the environment where they are. They may not know about another part of the planet because they don't live there, but where they live, that is how they know all about that, and they know what you should do, what you can do, what you can't do, what things you can eat, what you can't, and all of this they've learned. You know, it's part of their culture, their tradition, and they know that, and they know that they have to look after where they are, because if they don't look after where they are, they got nowhere to live, they've got nothing to eat, and they're going to suffer. So it's in their interest to understand how it all works and how their part in where they are. And I think that's most important. And I think because of that, I think, we should be listening to what the indigenous people have to say everywhere, because each group of indigenous people know how that particular place should be looked after, and how it works there.
Mm.
And I
I'll
wanted to say
definitely.
that I wanted to say that you talk about the butterflies and the moths, that we can look at them and we can think they're very pretty, or that which they are, and very interesting, which they are. But they also play a part in not only pollinating, because a lot of people talk about how it's important that they pollinate the plants, maybe for crops that humans are eating and whatever. But they play a part in food chains, because there's a lot of other creatures, say that, like many birds, one of the most important foods that the parent birds would have to gather to feed their babies, their chicks in the nest, would be caterpillars. So if there's no caterpillars about, those birds have got a problem because they can't find anything to feed their little ones. And also I'm thinking of like moths, which fly about at night. They're like a main food for bats. So, if there's not many bats where you're living, maybe it's because there aren't many moths flying about anymore. And so it's all little things like that. It's what I was talking about. Like you learn all this if you establish like a connection, interest in nature, you find out how it all works. And the food chains are so important. If you knock out anything in a food chain, it's going to have big effects like elsewhere.
And eventually it will affect us, but by the time it affects us, it's almost too late, or it's getting to the stage where yeah, we've got another species extinct, and this is something that is increasingly being rather concerning is the rate of species that are going extinct these days due to basically our humans' impact and our lifestyle on the, you see, the whole food chain as well. So we're going to sort of move a little bit away from there because you wrote a book also about the ocean, and this is saving, this it's an Earth Spirit book called Saving Mother Ocean. And so I'll just change the screen because you're holding up a copy of the book. And the reason I want to bring this up is because it's sort of it sits apart from other books on the ocean. And early this year, I was very fortunate to go down to Antarctica with my father. And one thing that sort of impacted upon me, apart from the wonderful sceneries, the penguins, and all the animals that we only hear about and don't actually see, was humans' impact. And I'm raising this because Antarctica is one of these places that's way down there. It's out of mind, out of sight. And we forget, or we don't want to sort of think about the fact that our earth currents or the ocean currents move around the world. And when we throw rubbish into the water, regardless if it's at the beach or on fishing boats, it doesn't miraculously disappear. It just moves around. And I'm quite sure that many people watching this are familiar or have heard about this island of pollution that's in the Pacific. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So I'm going to come back to you in relation to your book and what inspired you to write it, and take it from there.
Okay, well, thank you for asking me that because again, this is most important. How I became inspired to write this book is well, I maybe 10 years ago, something like that, and I started seeing like an increase in plastic in the environment. And everywhere, like everywhere I've been, including the countries I've lived in when I was in Tenerife and when I was in the UK, and now I'm in Portugal, I see plastic everywhere. And you can't get away from it. And I thought, well, this is really harmful. And the thing is, when plastic was first made, it was heralded as being this wonderful invention because it would last. That was part of the whole, the selling for it. It's like, plastic is wonderful, a new invention. This is something that won't break and it'll last for a long time. And, you can trust in plastic. And that is the problem, that it will last. So it doesn't break down in a natural way. It stays here. So even if it gets into smaller and smaller in pieces, it's still here. And so we have what we now call microplastics and we have nanoplastics, and you can't even see them. This is how bad it is. And the micro and the nano and the nanoplastics are everywhere. They're in the air, they blow about. They're on roads where they come from, like the tires of a vehicle when they wear. Because people think that the tires are made of rubber. They used to be, but now they're made of plastic and rubber. So there's bits of plastic wearing off all the time. There's all this plastic thrown just about everywhere, in the street, in the river, on the beach, off a ship. You name it, the plastic gets thrown. And all of this ends up somewhere in the environment. And even, with recycling, which is wonderful, like if you can recycle it, great. But the problem is that most of the stuff that's sent for recycling doesn't actually get recycled. So a lot of the plastic ends up in landfill, and a lot of the plastic gets burnt, which is just as bad because the smoke it makes is toxic. And so the plastic has become this incredible problem. Anyway, bearing all that in mind, I thought, I got to do something about this. Apart from picking it up, I thought, well, I'll write a poem. And I wrote a poem, and I had my poem, and then eventually my poem it became a song, and which often happens with things I write. because I regard myself as more of a writer and a poet than a musician, because I write the words first. But I find a tune, like I play guitar and I work out a tune. But what happened was, I remember when I put it together as a song, just before that, I was thinking, well, why aren't there any famous people singing about plastic pollution? There are still protest songs, you know. Somebody I follow, Neil Young, I love Neil Young's work. Neil has been doing protest songs all through his career and still is doing protest songs. I thought, well, surely Neil Young will do a protest song about plastic pollution. He didn't. So I thought, okay, it's over to me. Steve, you've got to put together a protest song about plastic pollution. So I did. And so that's how Where Does All the Plastic Go came about. And then Trevor from Moon Books was actually looking for somebody to write something about the oceans for the Earth Spirit series. So I said, Trevor, you know, I'm already on the job with this. I've got a song about plastic pollution. I talk about all these. So he said, all right. So that was how I started writing the book. But before I even started writing the book, I was aware of the fact that if people think about, oh, plastic pollution, it's terrible, goes in the sea, it's all over the beaches, it's awful. And what you mentioned about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is mostly plastic, and by the way, there are actually more of these. We call them gyres. There are 5 oceanic gyres and huge floating masses. And I thought, well, okay, there's all these other problems. There's like overfishing. You know, we're talking about the food chains, and sure, like fish are part of a food chain. You know, people eat fish. All the other marine, a lot of the other marine creatures eat fish. Fish eat fish. But if there aren't any fish, then we've got a problem. So overfishing the oceans, that's bad. We've got other sources of pollution going in the ocean. We've got climate change causing a problem with it's making the water too warm. We've got acidification of the ocean. We've got coral bleaching going on in the reefs. We've got nuclear waste going in the ocean. We've got nuclear stuff that's already been dumped in the ocean and forgotten about. We've got all these, and we've got a new one. We've got seabed deep sea mining. And like everybody knows, the mining on land can cause problems. We've got underwater mining going on now. So there are all these problems. And I'll just come back to the Kogi people I mentioned earlier. The Kogi people said in 1990 and 1991, the film went out. The film was called From the Heart of the World. And The Elder Brother's Warning. And it was a documentary, and it was directed by Alan Herrera. And it went out on the BBC, and it's still, you can still find it if you Google From the Heart of the World, The Elder Brother's Warning, the Kogi. And they said in there that, and they call us the younger brother, by the way, because they think that they were made before the rest of us, and so we're the younger brother. And they think that the younger brother is messing everything up because we're doing various things, including mining. They said this, that we must stop the mining, the drilling, okay? But this hasn't happened. So that they gave this warning in 1991. And the drilling and the mining is continued. And it is continuing. So what we should be doing, we're not doing. And that is just adding to the problem. So I wanted to explain all these things in my book. So what I've done in the book, and also, by the way, I've also mentioned the Kogi in my book, and I've got an endorsement from Alan Herrera that directed that particular documentary. And I thought, well, let's set it all out. Let's say all the different threats to the ocean. And let's also have a look at what can be done. So I've done that. And I've got like a section towards the back, I'm actually mentioning organizations and people that are actually doing something about restoring and saving the oceans and marine life. Something else that I just thought of is that towards the beginning of my book, as well as talking about indigenous people in the Kogi, I also thought, you know, anything that can motivate people, I think, is worthwhile. And I thought, well, if I say something about, if we think about Neptune, you know, and Poseidon, the gods of the sea, if we think about Aquaman, the superhero, you know, maybe you can kind of think of like, I'm helping Aquaman, or I'm helping Neptune, you know, and this was wonderful. This got picked up on by a journalist over here in Portugal, because he did like a full page article about me in the Portugal News, and it was called what was it called? Neptune, Poseidon, and Aquaman Stand By Me. That was the title, right? And the reason of the Stand By Me was because I'm well known for doing my cover of the Stand By Me song. In fact, I did that on Britain's Got Talent. So that idea I had about bringing like a god and a superhero into this worked, because of, you know, as I just said, that, you know, a journalist over here could see that made good copy, basically. And then what was even this was weird. This was like something which actually happened. The year after that went out, right? Jason Momoa, who is the star that played Aquaman, he was here in Portugal, and he was here for it was a marine conservation concert. I think it was maybe it was the United Nations concert. I can't be sure which one it was, because we've had several of these here. We've had various marine conservation concerts, and he was over here as a, you know, a special guest to be at this. And I thought this was like, you know, it kind of followed that. Like, I was talking about Aquaman in my book. A journalist over here, Jake Cleaver, his name was, wrote about this in the newspaper, and then the star that played Aquaman was actually here, and so, you know, it was all coming together, and I've just been trying to, with my book and in general, and even like right now, I'm trying to raise awareness. You know, I think like if people don't know about something, they can't do much about it. But if people do know, you know, a bit about it, or if they can feel motivated to do something about it, this is all, you know, to the better. And I think in a way that's something that like is about me, what I do. Like I can say like I'm a writer, and I'm a singer, which I am, but I'm also a motivator. You know, if I can motivate people, I think, you know, I'm doing my job, basically.
No, wonderful, Steve. And you did raise a number of very important points, and one of them, as you mentioned, the overfishing, and the other one is the microplastics, and that gets me, because I read somewhere that we may not be aware that, you know, they're into our food chain now, and that means they're into us. Everything that we eat has got a, you know, you mentioned the nanoplastics, and it doesn't break down. So all of this is now affecting, you know, okay, even if we don't worry about the animals, but us, our abilities, and they also then get into the brain and they cut off the circuits that we need. So it is actually a really big problem that people may not be all that consciously aware about. But I also want to touch on to, as you mentioned, the overfishing, because a number of years here in Australia, I think we stopped it. I don't know. They were trying to bring in the big trawlers and the super trawlers that just had the nets that would just pick up everything off the seabed, basically. And that would be it. They would sort of vacuum it up. And this is something, as I mentioned, I was very fortunate to go to Antarctica, is happening around the South Georgian islands with the krill. The ships that we went on, or the boat that we went on, was an expedition boat, had a lot of scientists on it, which was fantastic. And one of the sort of demonstrations that we did was that the food chain and everything comes down to krill. including everybody's running around trying to save whales, and it's great that the penguins are coming back and the seals, but everything eats krill. And we humans are harvesting krill for our to go into our fish oil supplements, which we do not need. And that really got to me, because when they're harvesting it in the patches right during the breeding season, and so there's the food chain, we take out the krill, means that we start taking out the plankton, then we start taking out the fish, then we start taking out basically the penguins, the seals, and the whales that everybody's trying to save. So we're having to sort of bring our attention back to our impact at a very micro level. And then added to that, I don't know if it's sort of float-on effect has happened to Britain and Europe, but last winter the ice sheet didn't grow back in Antarctica, which meant that a lot of the areas where the birds or the penguins would lay their eggs either was very weak or wasn't there. And that led on to, the avian flu that is highly contagious, which spread throughout all the islands. And we saw that the number of dead birds, and it's now coming into, or in certain parts around the world. I know here in Australia, Australians have arrived. The avian flu has arrived, and it's now going through sort of like poultry farms and things like that. And this is what it stemmed back to, our impact on the earth, and our actions are not just isolated. So have you had any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree that our actions anywhere are not isolated, to use your words, because anything that we do anywhere can have an impact elsewhere. Because everything is basically, it's like I can see it like a massive, mind-boggling jigsaw, that one thing fits to another thing, fits to this, fits to that. And if you pull a part of it out, then the rest of it is going to suffer. And unfortunately, there were so many parts of the planet that we've pulled those parts out, that we've messed up, the ecosystem. Gaia, another term for it. The balance of Mother Nature, Mother Earth, is being disrupted. And you were talking about the krill and talking about, Antarctica. And I was at the World Ocean Summit this March in Lisbon, here in Portugal. And I was very lucky. I got to meet Sylvia Earle. And Sylvia, by the way, she thinks my book is great, and she wishes me well with that. And I've got a photo of myself with Sylvia. But thank you. But one thing that she was making the point of telling people about, and she had, a projection to show actual footage of this happening, was she said that in Antarctica it's been raining, and this is no good for the penguins, because the penguins it's supposed to be snow and ice and freezing, and it's not supposed to be rain coming down. And this is no good, and the parent birds could do nothing about it. And the penguin chicks are not built, to be standing in water and puddles and all their down. It all gets wet and cold, and they're shivering, and the parents can't do anything. And that's just one absolute mess that's being created, and it's an ongoing problem. We're not supposed to be having rain in Antarctica, and I understand that there are like green patches of plants, mosses and stuff starting to grow there now. And so, you're talking about the krill, and it's like the penguins and the seals and the whales and fish as well. All these creatures which depend upon huge amounts of krill being there. The huge amounts of krill are not there because we humans are taking them. And it has, I call it a knock-on effect elsewhere. So if, say, some whales are going there and they need to feed on the krill, the plankton feeders, and they haven't got any, then maybe like they haven't got enough weight on them, that they're hungry, then they go elsewhere, because a lot of whales, they migrate. And then maybe they haven't got any food there either. So so many marine creatures are suffering from lack of food, and what we were just talking about, penguins. There's parts of the world where penguins used to be able to go in the sea and they could catch fish easily. They can't. And again, seals used to be able to go in the sea, catch fish easily. Sometimes they can't now. So it's like so many creatures and so many birds are just unable to find the food they need. And I was talking about caterpillars, for butterflies and moths. And again, it's the same problem. It's like in America, the monarch butterfly, which used to be, what it still is, one of the best known butterflies from America. And it's famous for its amazing migrations. And part of the main problem it has is that the milkweed plants, which it needs for the caterpillars, are gone, because they have like a different type of farming now, and they spray Roundup herbicide all over the crops, and it kills the milkweed. And so where, at an earlier time, a female monarch butterfly, she could have been flying across there, she could have found the milkweed plants and laid her eggs. She hasn't got those milkweed plants there now. So, okay, so there are a lot of people in America, trying to help. So people are growing milkweeds, but it's been like a disruption for how it should be. And I was talking to a Jehovah's Witness in Tenerife at one point. He called round, he knew me, and he called round, and he knew that I knew about butterflies. And I'm not a Jehovah's Witness myself, but I thought, well, I'll make some conversation that this guy could understand. And this is important. I said, Jehovah created it so that in America, you have many different species of milkweed that grow in all the different environments and microhabitats, microclimates there. So you have a milkweed that'll grow in a tropical, warm parts, a milkweed that'll grow in a desert area, a milkweed that'll grow in a swampy wetland area, a milkweed that'll grow in several different areas, a milkweed that'll grow right in the northern states of America and into Canada. All these different types of milkweeds. And there are, I don't know how many, but there are a lot. And each of them, the monarch butterfly could use as a food plant for its caterpillars. And I thought that in itself is amazing. And this guy could kind of think, yeah, sure, Jehovah could create that. And I could see that it is just absolutely amazing that you have a whole continent with different types of plants which are related that a specific type of butterfly can use for its caterpillars. But unfortunately, a lot of it's been ruined because we've done intensive farming across a lot of the land, and as I say, spray herbicide all over it, and a lot of other areas have just been destroyed for whatever reason, for urban sprawl and whatever, and so it's gone. And I see, going back to my childhood, because you asked me earlier about how I thought, how I got into all this. Like when I was a little boy, I would have been about 7 or 8, and my mum used to take me to a park, and this park was great. It had flowers, which you'd expect in a park. It had grass, lawns, which you'd expect in a park, and it had ponds. And the one pond it had newts. It had tadpoles of frogs. It had dragonflies. It had all these things were living in the pond. Fantastic. But we went there the one day and the pond had gone. I'm like, Mum, where's the pond? And they just basically flattened the land out, and they were making a flower bed there. And I was horrified because I thought, well, where can the newts and frogs that need this pond go if they haven't got, their home is gone, But I didn't think that much more. I was upset, but I thought, all right. But then that was, if I look back, that was the first example I saw of habitat destruction. And then I started to see more of it. So all my life, I've been looking at habitat destruction. You know, I was living in Cardiff then, you know, as you announced, and um, I would have been maybe a bit older, maybe 9 or 10 or something, and then I saw some more ponds destroyed. They were on a riverbank. They had the one pond, it had toads, frogs, the tadpoles of both of these, newts, stickleback fish, and dragonflies, and water snails. All of those things were living in this pond. Gone. They were doing some work on the riverbank to make it flat so it could be a walkway for people. They flattened the pond, gone. And I was thinking, well, where can, in the spring, when the toads and the frogs and the newts come back here, you know, to spawn in the water, they got nowhere to go. It's gone, you know. And that kind of horrified me as well. And so what I'm just trying to say is I've been watching wildlife habitats being destroyed all my life. And since I've been living in Portugal, I see this happening. Like if I just go down the block from where I live, there used to be 2 big pine trees. They've gone. They built some housing there now. There used to be a big pine tree over the road from this house I'm in. It's gone. And so each time I see a big tree removed, I see a pond destroyed, or any of these habitats, I don't just think, which I do think, I don't just think, oh, that's horrible, this wonderful tree or pond or whatever has gone. I think, where can the birds or the frogs or the toads or the butterflies or whatever lived there, where can they go that their home's gone? And I think a lot about that. One animal that, again, right near where I live, the European rabbit. Again, and I was absolutely horrified. Since I've been here 10 years, okay, there's a strip of woodland and scrubland about 10 minutes walk from where I live. There used to be a rabbit warren there, and I could go there in the evening and I could count on seeing rabbits. I went over there the one day and there was a team of workmen with a bulldozer, and they dug right through it all, and they were flattening the land, and they were pulling trees up and chopping down bushes. And oh no, it was like, you know, the Watership Down. Everybody knows that story. It was like having Watership Down on my doorstep, so to speak. And I worried about, you know, what will happen to the rabbits. Now, the good news is the rabbits have survived. Some of them managed to survive that, and they've moved, but they're still here. But I've been talking about that to people, and a lot of people don't realize that the rabbit is actually one of the creatures threatened with extinction. You know, I don't know if you know that, but the European rabbit is listed as an endangered species. And that seems crazy, because it used to be common, you know. You used to think, okay, and like in the UK, the hedgehog is an endangered species now. And so, like, you know, when I know facts like that, I always think, well, a big part of the reason is because where these animals live has gone. You know, and I understand that hedgehogs in the UK, one problem they have is they have lack of food. They haven't got, you know, I was talking about that earlier. People have got like weird artificial gardens now. This is a spreading major problem. Talk about plastic. People are having plastic lawns. AstroTurf, call it whatever you want to, like plastic lawns. Instead of having a grass lawn, which in itself is not particularly good as a habitat, but at least it's grass, it's got soil underneath it, and earthworms and things can live in it. This is now being got rid of to have a plastic lawn there. So you've got some gardens with no lawn, plastic lawn. You've got people having like walls and metal fences and stuff. And so there's no way, you know, that a little creature like a hedgehog, it can't even get from one garden to the next garden. And so they can't move about as easily. They can't find food, you know, where they are getting to. And it's just having an absolutely devastating effect on them. And again, it's something like when I was a boy, the hedgehog was really common. You could go out at night, you'd expect to find a hedgehog. In areas where rabbits lived, you could go out, you could expect to see rabbits. It wasn't something you would be surprised by. But now, as I say, the European rabbit endangered species, and I can see right where I live problems that the rabbit can has to deal with. And so I think the main point I'm making is that I'm seeing the homes of birds and animals and amphibians and fish and butterfly, all of this being ruined.
And often it's doing that for our convenience. You did mention the plastic lawns. A number of years ago here in Australia, we had there was a water shortage, which largely was because we only had one main water source. We've got two, but on my side of the country is the Murray-Darling, and because all the farmers were taking, well, it wasn't just the farmers, it was huge corporations owning stations were not only taking water from the main source, but also the tributaries. So when it came down to here in South Australia at the end, we hardly had any water. Then we had the Coorong, which is sort of the delta area, being blocked up. And that's a very important breeding ground for animals. But because we had a drought and the water shortage, convenient way was to dig up your lawns and replace them with astroturf and plastic grass that you mentioned. It's plastics, and when that breaks down, we get microplastics and nanoplastics that go into the air, and we're repeating the cycle. And it's almost sounding very depressing, and we're running out of time, Steve. But I thought it'd be nice to actually end on a good note, because I know there's so much more we really need to discuss, we as a human race, looking at our impact. And you mentioned the rabbits here in Australia. I think if you want your rabbits, we've got the extreme over here, that they run rapid over here. But let us end, if we can, on a positive note. What can we do? I mean, I want to sort of, anybody who's watching this, say below this recording, you will find a link to your YouTube channel, to your song about plastic. I'll see if I can find the Elder Brothers video as well. But as individuals, I think we really need to start being more conscious in like how we shop. Going down to the supermarket, do we need bananas in bananas? We don't need them in plastic. Do we need a paper plastic bag? I know here in Australia we have gotten rid of allegedly single-use plastics, which has caused a lot of stink in some areas, some people. I love it. I like bringing my bags. I don't mind carrying a few items of groceries in my hands. I know I am more conscious, aware of certain products that I buy as to how many layers of packaging they have on them. And I'll leave it over to you, because you are the expert in this area. What are some of the ways that we can now sort of help?
Well, I'm going to suggest one thing that is in my book. As I said, I got some solutions in my book. The one is adopting a vegetarian or vegan diet. And again, like, I'm not saying I'm expecting everybody to become vegan. I'm vegan myself, but I wasn't always vegan. So, I made the change. But of course, I don't think you can expect people just to say, oh, yeah, I'll do that. People have got lots of reasons. People have been brought up, eating meat, eating dairy, eating fish. They like these foods. You can't just say, don't do that, because it's not going to work. But what I can say, and what I think anybody can do, is they can reduce. I think reduce is such an important word. I talk about this a lot. I don't think any of us can be expected to stop using plastic. I think it's impossible. I mean, I got plastic glasses on. It's plastic everywhere, So we can't stop, but we can reduce. You said you can take your own bag. I take my own bag. We can do that. So that's reducing the amount of plastic. We don't have, and like we were talking about overfishing, if you stop eating fish, great. you know. But if you reduce the amount of fish you eat, it helps, you know. And so adopting a vegetarian diet is something anybody can do. And adopting a vegan diet is maybe more difficult, but it can be done. And so I'm just saying, like, if you can reduce the amount of dairy and fish and meat, it's going to help. So, you know, I'm not saying you have to. I'm not saying you have to become, you know, no, I'm saying reduce. And I think we can do a lot of reducing so many things that we're doing. You know, we can also, like, on that subject, I'm thinking about buying stuff. This is a big problem. Like, everybody wants to buy more stuff. We're encouraged to buy more stuff. Christmas is coming. Go and buy some stuff to give to other people. You know, like, I think we should just reduce the amount of stuff we're buying. Unless we absolutely need it, you know, we don't need to buy it. And all the things, you know, that we're buying are coming from the planet, coming from Mother Earth. They're resources. And if we can reduce the amount we're taking, it's all to the good. And that's something else that I think.
Yeah, and it's coming back to changing our mindset, eating more seasonally, more locally, and reducing. I mean, over here we had advertisements for Christmas, I think back in September, getting earlier and earlier. And it's not just little things, it's big things, big expensive things that we don't simply need. And I think maybe we need to change our whole shift that, yes, okay, if we needing to get together for Christmas, maybe turn the focus on spending quality time together. I know down here where it's summer, so maybe go out in nature and have a picnic together in nature as a family. Where you are, it may not be weather appropriate to be outside, but you can still bring in a little bit more awareness to our planet. And again, I know that we can expand this out, but we are really running out of time. And what I'm wanting to do, Steve, is coming up to the end of the year. Do you have anything planned for 2025? Where can people find you? What's happening? If people want to get in touch with you, I know you talked a little bit about Britain's Got Talent when we haven't even gotten to the festivals that you've played at. But if people want to say, hey, we want your books, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, there's another one of my books. It's really easy to get in touch with me. If you just Google Steve Andrews, Bard of Ely, you will find me. Because I'm on all the social media, and you know, steveandrews.info is a site, and bardofely.org is a site, but I'm very easy to find. And one thing that I say, well, it is my motto is I keep on keeping on. So I'm always doing something, and I have a new song out, which is We Can Sing Together, and it's a song for peace, and it's available on a Christmas album from America, Let's Have a Rocking Christmas by Various Artists, Volume 9, and that is out. And it was the words were written by Stephen Friedland, who is also known as Brute Force, and he was once on the Beatles Apple Records in 1969 with his song King of Fur. But Capitol and EMI were not happy with this, the lyrics King of Fur, because part of the lyric is all hail the Fur King. And the Fur King did what he wanted to do. And so it sounds like that word, but it isn't that word, but no, we can't have that. So it took 40 years before this song was re-released. Anyway, he wrote the words for We Can Sing Together, which is my latest release. And so at the moment, I'm pushing that song. I'm pushing my books. I'm doing what I can. I'm doing something on this Saturday coming. I'm doing a talk and some songs in Lisbon at a place there, and I'm looking after my cats and looking after butterflies, and I give talks on butterflies, and I'm just always doing something. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me or find out about me, it's easy enough.
That's great. And I'll put the links below this recording so people can reach out to you and can find out about your books and also where they can purchase your CDs. And there's the other book there. We didn't have time to talk about your herb books either. So yeah, you've written a number of books and one of your CDs. Fantastic. So Steve, thank you very much for joining with me. I said, I'm surprised that, well, I'm not surprised. Time has just gotten away with us. This is a really big topic from my part of the world. Thank you very much for the work that you've been doing. And as you said, you talking about your childhood has sort of brought back memories of my childhood. I was a country girl and was sort of like, I think for our generation, we really need to do something more so future generations can see those, have that experience of jumping in the ponds and seeing the tadpoles and looking through the rock pools. I know when I go home, I have a young niece and nephew, and it's great to poke around to see what's in the rock pools down at the beach. I'm not much into the water myself. So once again, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Well, thank you, Francis. It's been really wonderful talking to you, and I'm glad that you have memories of rock pools and tadpoles as well. And I think this is where it starts. When we're children, we find out about those things. They're just amazing, parts of nature, and connecting with nature is good.
Yes, and reminding us ourselves that we are part of.
We are part of nature. I did say that. I was going to say my book is called Saving Mother Ocean because a lot of people think about Mother Earth, about Mother Nature, but Mother Ocean is where it all began.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. In the mythologies, we all emerged, even science saying we all merged out of the primordial waters. So we have to, waters. Yeah, this is our mother.
I'm back to the Kogi now, because that's what the Kogi say. The Kogi call their creatives a great mother, and they believe in the beginning there was a great ocean, and the mother thought, and then she thought of all the stuff which we have. And so, yeah, it all comes from the mother.
Yeah, wonderful. And something we need to remind ourselves more and more in this world of over commercialism. So I'm just going to leave it there because we are running out of time. Once again, Steve, thank you very much for joining me today and having these discussions. For everybody who's watching, thank you too for your time. Don't forget to check out Steve's links below. And let's start doing something proactive to save our mother. Blessings.